Right then, it's time for another update on the Kodiak. Last time you saw this quad, I'd rebuilt the head with new guides, seals, seats, valves, etc. Because of the problem where it was smoking on overrun, and it was still smoking. I'd stopped the overrun smoking, but I created another problem by increasing the compression, that it was smoking quite heavily on hard acceleration. So, obviously I had to take it all apart again, because once you get so far into something you just have to finish it. Now luckily on these machines the barrel actually completely lifts off. Let me show you that now. You see that? The silver bit, head comes off there, barrel comes off at the bottom. So luckily, let's just stick that plastic back on there. Luckily I was able to just lift that off and take it to the machine shop to get it checked out. Luckily for me, it was just about its original specification, so it didn't need to be rebored, which saved me a hell of a lot of money and time. I was able to just get away with a quick hone in and putting genuine rings in it. In my opinion, if you're doing this, you always should put genuine rings in something, because if you're that far in, the extra 10 quid or whatever, it's worth it. These are the rings that came out. They don't physically look too bad. Certainly not the top two rings. Slightly rusty from just sitting on the floor for a few days. The only issue I saw, I don't know really if it's that much of an issue, is that the oil control rings that sit either side of the actual control ring itself are fairly indentated. If you run your finger along you can actually feel it. So whether that would let oil through, potentially, I don't know. I do know it had a hell of a lot more compression when I put it back together. The bore itself, before you could spin the engine, the piston would go up and down fine. Now you spin the engine, the piston would actually take the bore up with it. So there's clearly a lot more internal friction in there with the new rings. The quad runs fine now, doesn't smoke at all. I'm not going to start it up now because it's in the sort of delicate running in period. I've taken it a good few miles, hence the mud on it. Didn't smoke at all, not on acceleration, overrun, anything. I thought my timing was incorrect initially, because it seemed to be fairly down on power, although that quickly sort of subsided and becoming more what it was before. So I believe that's just down to the initial very high internal friction. There's a fair few things that want to be done to this quad, because I've gone so far with it mechanically. If I'm going to resell it, which I'm actually considering keeping this one now as my personal bike, because of the amount of work in that I know it will be sound when it's finished. But still I want to get it perfect, so there's a few things that I want to do. The solenoid got burnt out during the rebuild process, because when the machine shop messed up the valves, you have to watch a previous video if you want to find out about that. I kept trying to start it, which ended up causing the solenoid to burn. I got a new one on them orders, so that's not an issue. Just stick that back now. It's not got an air filter in it is the other thing. Didn't have one when I bought it. I completely cleaned the box just for the brief bit of running before I rebuilt it. But obviously it's going to need one of them. Machine Shop did comment that the bore had some light scratch marks, some dirty air. They're actually unbelievably expensive. About £50 for the guide and the filter. So whether I'll go for an aftermarket solution on that, I don't know. A couple other things. It's missing the piece of plastic oil cover. Now, obviously that's not going to affect it in any way, but it just makes it a naff, especially to a potential buyer. So I probably buy that. That's probably about 30-40 quid off a used machine. Don't know what it would be new, probably horrendous. This rear alloy, is slightly cracked, so it goes down in about 2 weeks. These are actually off a Suzuki King Quad 500. Whether I just epoxy that or leave it, I don't know. Speedo doesn't work. Speedo is a mechanical speedo with a mechanical dial. I can show you. Yeah. There we go. See that? That's actually a physical, mechanical sort of semi-hard wire that goes back to the transmission. So I'm not going to get into that because something fairly hefty will need to be replaced if I want that to work, so it's just not worth the bother. That headlight doesn't work, although thankfully I can get that there. It is just a bulb. bulb's completely missing out of there, so that should be an easy fix. I've replaced the wheel bearings, which was causing a bit of a dodgy ride. Tracking is ever so slightly out still. I did the best I can by hand. It doesn't particularly matter on an off-road machine. Whether I take it to a shop to get it properly sorted, I don't know. What else is there? I don't think there's that much else. Yeah, the recoil doesn't work. Doesn't bother me. In reality, they never get used. Well, I don't think I'll replace it, to be honest. I'll either do one or two things. I'll either just leave it, or on machines newer than 2005, they actually come with just a blank off plate, just to cover the spinning nut on there. So I may just buy one of the blank off plates because they're a lot cheaper than a new recoil. Other than that, it's fairly sound now. As I've told you many times, that boot there got replaced. The front four-wheel drive shaft. Come on. That one there, as you can see. That just there, that got replaced. As did the front and rear main seal. Whoever did the belt job before, apparently he's had a belt just before I bought it. But the original seal only goes along the top, along the bottom it's some sort of weird mastic sealant. So I may replace that. Because when you're going heavily off-road, stuff can get in there. The winch works fine. I'll probably try and button that up a bit better. If you can see, it's still ever so slightly loose. Probably can't tell, but it's only got 2 bolts in it. Obviously it needs a thing for the end, but I've got one of them. I'll obviously give it a full cosmetic clean as well. Polish the plastics. You'd be surprised how much this will look like a pretty much brand new machine when I'm done with it. Probably replace the stickers. It actually looks quite rough now, but at the end it won't be. I might make a separate video on that, just showing you how to get it looking as new as possible. And I think that is actually it with it. I might actually be on the home stretch with it. As I say, I'm not going to start it up now because of the lack of an air filter, sorry, and the risk of damage. The oil will actually have to be changed as well in the near future, just in case any minute bits of metal from the new rings, etc. get into the oil. The only other thing is the previous owner was a bit of an idiot, as you might be able to guess. And one of the idiotic things he did was hack that rather weird sports exhaust onto it. So I'll either weld, you can probably see that, it's a fair hole there. So I'll either weld that or just cover it in a ton of exhaust space and clamp it as best I can. Just to stop the leaks. It sounds alright, it runs fine. It's not an issue, but it just annoys me. So yeah, I think the next video will be a sort of cosmetic video, how to get it looking as good as possible. So yeah, see you in the next one.